They said it was our window on the world. They said it had the power to make the common man uncommon. It came into our homes and changed our lives for all time to come. It was television.
I Remember Television, a perspective on the past, the programs and personalities of television's first decade. Presented by KVCR Television and your host, Ed Rothhaar.
And this week we come to the second of our two-part documentary covering the earliest history of television in this country, beginning at the very beginning when it was introduced to the public at the New York World's Fair in 1939. Don Leifer, our producer, has acquired this special program for us, and we hope you enjoyed the first portion. Now we're going to have the second. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Here it is, New York Television and the people who made it. That's live from New York, as I Remember Television.
The employees of Keyspan Energy are proud to present this landmark program. In the new deregulated world of energy, Keyspan provides over 7 million people with energy products and services for their homes and businesses.
Special funding is provided by The Wiz. Additional support is provided by WNBC New York, WNYW New York Fox 5, Maury Povich, and the members of 13.
Well, radio, I like a lot. Radio today has got Huskies, Wheaties, Toshi Schlitz, Wrigley's, Beaches, Crumbles, Ritz, Kleenex, Clorox, Oxidol, Kix, Cracks, Tootsie Roll, Lysol, Latex, Frigidaire, Linda Libby's, Munsingware, and Portia faces life as John's other wife. And also Gloria's Tallulah. Oh, darling, darling. But radio's got no puppets and no parades. It's got no wrestlers and no charades. No old-time movies from 1902. Television, I love you. Billy.
I'm Al Roker. In part one of our look at New York television, we remembered the early years of the medium. It was a period in which everything was new and the parameters were just being drawn. It was sometimes a case of winner take all. In 1940, CBS demonstrated the first color television system. Some say it was technologically superior to the one RCA developed a few years later. But in 1953, after much lobbying with the FCC, RCA's system became the industry standard. RCA and its network NBC were also successful in programming battles in those days, partly because NBC was run by one of the first truly brilliant television executives, Sylvester Pat Weaver. His legacy has a special meaning to me.
Pat Weaver was a remarkable guy because he said, and when he saw the potential of television maybe more clearly than a lot of people that were in high positions. I was privileged to work on all of the Pat Weaver concepts. Today, Tonight, Home, Wide Wide World, Radio Monitor. I was part of all of those things.
He was looking to create forms in television, and these were major forms. Think about the morning show today, and he had a show called The Home Show, if I remember correctly. He had the 11 o'clock at night, which we're still doing, tonight. And I think his idea was, and then blanket the whole thing with spectaculars on Saturday night.
Pat Weaver also appealed to David Sarnoff because Pat Weaver wanted things that were cultural and that got ratings.
When they fired Pat Weaver, it was always the buck. It's always the buck, always will be the buck. Except today, they are a little more cognizant of what their talent is. In those days, they threw talent away.
Somebody said to him one time when he proposed the Today Show, they said, nobody's going to turn a television set on at 7 a.m. And he said, you're right. If there's nothing on, they're not going to turn it on. But if you put a program on, they will. And of course, he was right.
I think television is just in its incipiency.
Who's the Pat Weaver who's going to have any vision for it?
I'm going to give you a shirt to help out. Sometimes things come full circle. The game show New York Wired is produced by Jonathan Goodson, son of Mark Goodson, one of the pioneers of the genre. When Mark Goodson began his career, virtually every game show emanated from New York City. The national audience loved them, and they even influenced other television genres.
From Brooklyn, New York, Mr. Ralph Cramden.
How do you do, Mr. Hamlin? Now it's time for you to select a category.
Popular songs.
Popular songs. Very good, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt her, but our time is up.
There were a whole spate of cheap, easy-to-do panel shows. What's My Line? I'll Buy That, which was one that I did.
Most people don't know that Mike Wallace got his start as on network television as a game show host, and was very good at it.
I could ad-lib from time to time and had a certain quality of being able to get people on the panel to talk.
Every celebrity wanted to be on a game show, but most people don't know that these celebrities had to be auditioned, because you really had to be bright to be on To Tell the Truth. It wasn't, you know, you had to know about your topic, you had to figure out what to even ask questions about. So we did auditions for the rotating panelist.
Ira Scutch, who was at Goodson Todman at the time, saw me in a nightclub performance, and he said, this guy's very clever as a comedian. I wonder if he's got the broad spectrum of knowledge that would allow you to play game shows. And that was my first game show. And then I went to $25,000 Pyramid, To Tell the Truth, Match Game, Password, all of those word association games that required language skills.
Concentration was a long-running Goodson-Todman show, ably hosted by Hugh Downs. But in the days of live television, even Downs, the ultimate pro, had his special moments.
Card says you've been married 8 years and you got a 9-year-old child. And to my horror, she looked up at me and she said, yeah, that's right, I had to get married. And in those days, it was not, you know, I'm talking now 1958. And so I wanted to get off the subject as fast as I could, so I went to my legal phrase and I said, well, I guess you know how the game is played. And of course, the studio audience caught fire, and there was about 3 minutes of solid laughter and everything before we got on with the game. But that's the kind of thing that happened in live television.
I used to walk the streets after I got well known with other performers, bigger than I by far, superstars maybe. They say, hey, Nipsey, and then they wouldn't know this other person was there. I said, how you get such recognition? I said, well, on a game show, every time there's a question, the camera comes close up on your face for an answer. And people get to see what you are like as an individual, whether you have wheels that turn or whether you're stupid.
Some early producers and network executives, such as Lewis Cowan, saw game and quiz shows as something more than just a chance to win prizes. Cowan saw them as something to ennoble education and human intellect. But the early ones quickly became a chapter in television history not so fondly remembered.
The question was, how did you package information? How do you get the ordinary guy to respect people who are scholars and artists and know what they do? And the $64,000 question grows out of that, of his desire to publicize and reward people who knew things other people didn't know.
$64,000 question started it, where you brought back people week after week as they ascended the ladder of winnings.
But because so much money was involved, people started watching these shows in record numbers, and it prompted all kinds of things to happen, including the fact that they needed to keep the ratings up.
So my assumption was that their way of controlling things was to play into or away from strengths. And that's the way they knew how to control. And I suspect in the beginning, that's actually the way they did it.
Of course, they would like the person to win who got the highest ratings.
There were several things that were obviously false. One is, at the beginning of $64,000 Challenge, the vice president of Chase Manhattan came on with the questions that had been kept in the vault and presented to me on the stage. And that part was literally true. There had been a set of questions kept in the vault, and they brought it to me on the stage. It was never said on the air that this was the only set of questions, because I had been shown a set of questions just before the show just to make sure I was comfortable with the language and understood the pronunciations of some of the more arcane names. So I knew at least that there were not only one set of questions, little things like that.
From New York City, Mr. Charles Van Doren, and returning with $69,500 from Forest Hills, New York, Mr. Herbert Stemple.
And then, of course, the one that got in trouble was 21, the NBC show with Charlie Van Doren. My late wife had shared a cubicle at Columbia with Charlie Van Doren, and he came to dinner when he was absolutely on top of the world and said, "What do you think?" Because he also had this feeling that he was projecting a different image for the young scholar.
They convinced Charles Van Doren that it would be a help to education if they could see an educated person winning. So he was kind of against it at first. He wanted to do it honestly, and on his own he was pretty educated himself. But they insisted that no, it didn't matter, that he was doing a good thing for education in general.
And it was going to be very good for the country. And my wife, Ellen Moore, said, "I think it's a disaster." And he said, "Why do you think it's a disaster?" I said, "Because it's trivial. You're trying to do serious work, and what you're really doing is making a lot of money on trivia."
I guess that Atahualpa was the leader of the Incas at the time of the conquest.
That's your answer, Atahualpa?
That's right.
Then you've scored 21 points.
And when the thing blew up, when it was revealed that he had been coached and he'd been given the answers in advance, one of the first people he called was Ellen. And he came to dinner again, and he said, "I just want you to know that you were the only one of my friends who said, don't do this."
It was kind of tragic how Van Doren was hounded because he had been given answers. And there were some people given answers that never got into they stayed out of the spotlight somehow, or never skewered that way.
I think it was a loss of innocence. I think that it contributed to an amalgam of situations that have occurred since then that have made people much more untrusting and much more cynical.
Public trust is a fragile thing. And when the public came to know that these shows were rigged, they must have felt pretty betrayed, because they thought they were watching real people win real prizes,
I think probably, that target demographic, the 18 to 49 target demographic, was distressed by it. So today, there are lots of people out there who distrust what they hear.
This is a terrible thing. It really shook this country up, I think. But I also think, as a journalist myself, it's not such a bad thing. It's good that people question. And I think they do so in part because of the quiz channels.
Since 1969, children worldwide have been growing up with Sesame Street, currently produced in Queens. For each generation, it seems, kids shows form the shared references that are with us forever. The Cookie Monster is an icon for anyone under 30. For us boomers, the New York kid shows from the 1950s and 60s were an art form and the last bastion of the golden age of television.
Stand by for Captain Video! Handheld Video Rangers!
Richard Coogan was the first Captain Video, and he was the Ranger. What are we going to do, Ranger? Well, I don't know, Captain. This great drama like that was done out of the Wanamaker studio on East 9th Street. They had the studio in the middle of this department store. And sometimes they would do chase scenes in this department store, and they would put the camera just on people's feet, because if they raised the camera up, you would see that they were running through the linen section or something like that. And Captain Video, I think, was done on a budget of about $15 a week.
Well, in the beginning, nobody knew that there was any money to be made off children's programming, and children like news was sort of discerned to be a responsibility by the network to do something good for the kids.
Say, kids, what time is it?
Buffalo Bob was a kind of like Garraway and a few other people on television. He melted the glass between the television set and you.
People say one of the reasons for its early popularity was because it premiered on the morning of a great snowstorm in New York City in 1947.
Very fortuitous for Buffalo Bob and Martin Stone and NBC, because the kids weren't out playing because of the snow, and it was exactly, the audience probably doubled.
And so the ratings were huge for that first show.
And I went actually to be in the peanut gallery. I got a Three Musketeers bar, a jar of Ovaltine, and a picture, I think, of Howdy.
It's howdy doody time, it's howdy do. I hated that song. Oh,
But Buffalo Bob and Clarabelle, who the first Clarabelle the Clown was Bob Keeshan, who later became Captain Kangaroo.
And I worked on that show as Sailor Clyde, and Bob was the best. But he worked on the premise that every 3 years he'd have a new audience, which is true. But he kind of buttonholed his audience to the really young group. And my show was for everybody. I wanted to do a show that the parents could sit down and watch with the kids and everybody be entertained. I guess what I said was for the adults. What I did was for the kids.
And every day we were trying something new. We had a budget of minus 10 cents.
I didn't have a day off because we're all live. I was on 7 days a week.
I met Chuck through his agent. He says, I got this kid you're not going to believe who can do Laurel and Hardy impressions, and he works with puppets. And we brought in Chuck one day, and I was overwhelmed by the talent and the drive and initiative of this young man.
I would get up in the morning, hit Lexington Avenue, and walk down to 42nd Street from 49th Street and create the show from 49th Street to 42nd Street. And I just, with the props that I got out of the trash the night before on Park Avenue, or a couple of days before, we put together these wacky pieces of business.
And the other great, I think, wonderful TV performer was Sandy Becker, who had about 8 million different characters.
There was Captain Jack, Captain Officer Joe, Fireman Bill, Beachcomber Bill, Chuck McCann, and then over at Channel 5 they had Soupy Sales and Sandy Becker, and they brought a new cartoon in called Hercules, which is one of those minimal
choppy.
Yeah. Like that, very little motion. I thought they were horrible, but I did my best with them. I had a lot of fun, actually, because I was making fun of the things, and maybe that's what they didn't like.
And the laugh.
Yeah, kids used to stop me on the street and say, "Let me hear you laugh." I didn't know there was anything special about the laugh. Here we go.
Anytime you wore a top hat or a bow tie, you were considered a children's show. Just so I got on was all I cared about.
Show me England being invaded by toads, and I'll show you a froggy day in London town. Now, just what do we mean by that? Yeah, what do we mean by that?
And there's also the one about what's the difference, he told a joke, what's the difference between snowmen and snow women? And the answer was snowballs. That supposedly got him thrown off the air. But he was wonderful to watch.
It was a physical type show. I think that's why it became such a big hit. Very few people were doing pies,
I'd never come to this joint again. I'd see somebody do that to one of us.
Well, wait a minute. There were 3 of you, and there's 2 of him. He's the one that brought the kid.
Wait a minute! He comes in and he goes, pop! He's like that!
Now, wait just a moment.
My daddy tried to... Did you do that to him? No, I
Now, wait a minute. I was trying to take good care of you. You wait just a moment.
Hey, you can't do that to my leader.
If not every moment was golden, if not every program was educational in content, nevertheless, they were live hosts.
Wonderama, of course, was a wonderful show, not only because of Sonny Fox, but they had all these kids real kids would be on the show, and you got to participate in all these great contests.
And I was a host. I mean, it was like that. No auditions, no pilots, no nothing.
And then the kid would hold out his arms, and they would just put in his arms one game, one board game after another until you couldn't see the kid anymore. And wow, did I want to be one of those kids.
Then Freddie Silverman found out that if you put cartoons on Saturday morning, they could get a rating, and that then suddenly you could make money, and then all of a sudden, as later happened with news, children's programming was perceived as a profit center. And once you perceive it as a profit center and then the ratings become the dominant factor there, then a whole series of changes ensue.
Children's programming was very important and was a moneymaker. The after-school specials, which ABC started, were wonderful one-hour dramas that all of the affiliated stations were very happy to take.
Indeed, not all children's programming is merely meant to be recess. We learned of historical events from You Are There, about the fundamentals of music from Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concerts, found out about grammar on Schoolhouse Rock, and today continue to learn our alphabet and more on Sesame Street.
Look, one, grouchy grouch. What, just scram, huh?
All you have to do is to live here for 6 months. And if at the end of that 6 months you walk faster, talk faster, think faster, you're a New Yorker, and you got that New York edge.
I like when a sanitation man leans out of a truck and says, "Hi, Gabe." I'd miss it if that didn't occur.
Well, New York is the only place in the world you can walk into an Arab home in a Scandinavian neighborhood and find a Puerto Rican baby eating matzo balls with chopsticks.
Local stations have made rich contributions to our television heritage. We all remember sampling Hollywood classics on The $1 Million Movie and groundbreaking public affairs shows such as Inside Bedford-Stuyvesant. But the real symbol of New York for New Yorkers were the local TV personalities with their live and inexpensive programs.
If I could write a song, I would call it To the End of the World with You, and then to the world beyond. That's how much I enjoy, how much I want to be with you. First, let me say good morning, whether it's 8:30 in the morning or 1:30 in the morning. We say good morning. A very cordial welcome to our Joe Franklin TV show every day for 90 minutes.
The program is called Memory Lane every morning. Joe Franklin hosting show business, television business, past, present, and future.
Joe Franklin is not a person who would be on the air in prime time, but you could put him on really cheaply. He would attract the kind of guests that people who were insomniacs, who, you know, had nothing better to do but to flip through the TV, might watch it a little bit, and you can get some cheap sponsor who would be perfectly satisfied with that. And Joe Franklin lasted for years and years and years and years.
They would always say to me, Joe, we want to syndicate your show, but in order for us to syndicate the show, the way they do the Mike Douglas show or the Oprah Winfrey, whatever it was, you got to lose the New York flavor and make it more national, more international, more of a cross-blending. But I would not ever forego the New York bounce and flavor and rhythm of the tempo of my show. I always kept it what I would call Manhattan, Broadway. I didn't want to tamper with it. Even though I could have made way more money, I was just happy being Mr. New York.
She's a high priestess now.
It's almost unbelievable. Yeah, you know, because I saw them all. I used to sit in the hotel room where I was living down here and screen them, you know, ahead of time to find places to jump in and out.
Finding someone like you in this strange setting with witchcraft and jungle gods, it's...
Kill him, Big Bum! Kill him! Kill him!
He's something wonderful, wild, and crazy, and he was certainly much more fun than the movie was.
So the Count, he locks her in his torture chamber, where she sings the haunting lament, Ci sarebbe Giacomo.
And the piano player was a man by the name of Earl Wild, who is a concert pianist these days. And he would play the piano whenever the occasion came up. I did an opera called Il Dracula.
My mother was a lady, as yours you will know, and you may have a sister who needs protection now. I come to this fair city to find a brother dear, and you wouldn't dare insult me, sir, if Jack were only here.
It usually lasted a year at each station at Channel 7, 9, and 11. I'd run through their films, maybe use each film twice within the year, and then go to another station and use their films.
Religious programming on New York TV seems a very distant memory. But Bishop Fulton Sheen, with several different shows during the 1950s, was a New York institution. One of his local programs even competed successfully against television powerhouse Uncle Milty on Tuesday evenings.
And that pretty well explains all wars without cynicism, at least.
We have a Sunday morning series about religion called Look Up and Live. We do it because the FCC says we have to have religious content. You could do it easily. So I wrote one for him about music as carrying religion into daily life. And we had Mahalia Jackson singing spirituals. Fabulous. And some kid singer, a band singer called Merv Griffin, was singing the blues.
Midday Live was a public affairs television program. That meant that the station got a certain credit for putting Midday on for 90 minutes a day, 5 days a week, which was not particularly going for ratings. Their obligation to do that legally changed at some point in the early 80s. And I remember walking into our pretty large offices saying, I hear the death knell for the program. I mean, pick a topic, and we did it on Midday. Pick a topic that had to do with New York and the tri-state area between 1975 and the end of 1986, and we did it.
Because we were local, we were able to do these things. You know, clean up Central Park, get the mayor on, do those things. You can't do that anymore because you don't have local shows anymore.
A question. Do you ever remember a time when Gabe Pressman wasn't anchoring or reporting our local news? I don't think so.
Gabe Pressman was the quintessential local news reporter. He was the best I ever saw in New York, the best I ever saw in any other city.
I remember in the early days, I said to the guy who hired me, I said, someday we're going to have news operations, we're going to have news, I don't know if I used the word news directors, but it's going to be like a newspaper. We're going to have a news operation, and we're going to have a lot of reporters, and we're going to be competing with the other outfits. And he said, Gabe, get that out of your head. You're just a gimmick. This is show business.
The stations have the free use of the frequency spectrum, which is given to them by the government, and they should be grateful. They make a bundle of money exploiting a public resource for which they pay nothing. So the difference between one's attitude toward networks can be responsible or irresponsible, whatever they are, private enterprise. But stations, presumably, are supposed to be serving a public interest.
And we're more than just a television station.
That's right, Janice. 13 is also the creator of innovative educational projects.
For younger viewers, I think, don't expect something on PBS that they're going to like. I just don't think they expect it. And I would like to, change that.
Churchill said to avoid risk is to ensure failure, and that's certainly true of what we think of in public television.
There were efforts to bring about more educational TV. It didn't last very long, and Minnow didn't last very long, but they tried.
Omnibus was supported by the Ford Foundation as an effort to use this powerful media to really educate in a broader sense. And the excellence of those programs was not questioned, but the size of audience was. And it told the Ford Foundation that perhaps if they were going to influence through television the culture of this country, it needed an environment which the size of audience was not as important as the quality of what was being fed.
And the idea of having a non-commercial alternative to a liberal administration was a pretty appealing idea.
And so they switched their philanthropy and their attention to these new educational stations who were very often doing programming that dealt with education, a curricula, a teacher with a particular formula.
And two things came together for public television. First, federal funds, and then the Ford Foundation, which had been funding television, public television, under Fred Friendly's leadership, decided to put together National Educational Television, which was a production organization, with what was then Channel 13, WNDT, into one organization called WNET, Channel 13.
This afternoon, there were 67 stations in the country. Tonight, this becomes the 68th.
When I think about public television as it tries, you know, it doesn't belong to the sellers yet completely, although they're there. But the people have claimed the airwaves, and as we, so therein, I think, is another bastion of hope.
When broadcasters were under great pressure to do quality television, public broadcasting, in a way, let them off the hook, because they could always point to, well, we do that on Channel 13. We don't have to do that on our network. Oh, Channel 13 does that, so we can just entertain and make all the money.
I'm Jerry Seinfeld. I tell jokes for a living. But there's no joking about the financial crisis here at PBS. This is the only time this year we'll be asking for donations.
We have to spend about 90–95% of our time looking for the funds to make these programs.
From an actor standpoint, with specialty channels and variety channels.
It's opened up a whole new area of unemployment.
Whole new area of unemployment.
But that's okay.
A number of cable and pay television networks were born in New York City. Ironic, because with its concrete and apartment buildings, the city was difficult to wire. Many of the cable shows are produced here with that original pioneering spirit. And as with the development of broadcast television 50 years ago, these new choices and changes in technology tempt our concept of the future. Will it be digital, high definition, 100, 200, 500 channels? These are the questions for the next millennium.
There are institutions like Madison Square Garden and Cablevision and new companies, including the internet, that are going to take this industry, revise it, and be successful all over again.
Oh, cable is the best thing that happened to television. It's a real alternative to what the networks were.
For years, MTV looked like it could have come from anywhere. It was just in a room somewhere. It was basically in back rooms and production studios in Manhattan. We figured, hey, we're in Times Square. We're on the second floor. Let's do it there.
By next year, maybe we'll be back on track.
Reality is slapping me in the face.
I'm lucky that I've survived.
This is a Nick News special edition. What are you staring at?
I think there's too many already, and I get so confused I don't know what to watch.
Broadcasting has turned to narrowcasting. Broadcasting used to, as we know, used to include everybody. But now, with all of these various channels, you a sailor, you a bridge player, you a ballettoman, you are a... Whatever is your taste, whatever is your interest, whatever is your hobby, whatever is your obsession, it's going to be out there for you.
Once I went to a restaurant in Moscow, and they brought out a menu, 327 dishes. Turned out they only had 4. And if you look at the menu of television channels, if you got 2 good shows on at once, you're doing okay.
Clearly, the coming together, the confluence of television and computer technologies is going to play some very important role in the shaping of this all. But all the mergers and backs and forths right now is because nobody quite knows. They're all sort of putting their chips on every square on the table because they don't know which square is going to pay off.
It's the computer that has the magic. That's the thing that has the magic. And you have the screen, and you have the unit, and that's what's taking the place. I can see it in my own kids.
How much time in the day can you be on the internet, watch television, whether it's high digit or low digit? Have we become a recreational, passive society?
I think people keep forgetting there are an awful lot of people in this country that don't yet have cable. And if they did, they don't have money for pay television. I think that we still have a vast number of people in this country who are distanced by either geography or economy from all of these other so-called wonderful benefits. They don't have them yet.
Our city is an international crossroads. That's one of the reasons Phil Donahue moved his long-running show here back in 1985. Even when the chatter is lighter, there's vitality to New York talk.
I can't imagine The talk show, as we now know it, emanating from anywhere but New York. They were trying to bring new talent, quotes, from around the country. Gary Moore came in from Chicago. He was doing Club Matinee on the radio in Chicago. Steve Allen came in from Chicago.
There was late night TV before I showed up and did The Tonight Show. There was a marvelous program called Broadway Open House, and there were old movies, and there were different channels, and they all had something on the air at 11:30 or 12 at night, but nothing of that sort. So very quickly the show became very popular. Pretty soon the man who was running NBC's programming department, Pat Weaver, called up and said, in effect, I'm looking for a late night show because we've had good luck with Today, and I want to call the show tonight. He said, we'd like you to do it. He said, I will have to change the name of it from the Steve Allen Show to Tonight. And I said, I don't care what you call it. I'll be happy to do it.
When Steve Allen departed Tonight for prime time, the show was reinvented and redefined by its second permanent host, Jack Paar.
Jack was so real that, unlike Pagliacci, the clown who would laugh when his heart was breaking, if Jack's heart was breaking, he'd cry, and it was that real.
When I met Jack, I think he was in his 70s, and was invited to his house a couple of times, and it was like Jack was still doing the show. I mean, I don't mean to suggest that he was nuts and had the set, everything in the living room, and Miriam, his wife, was introduced. No, it wasn't like that. But he was bright and alive and full of curiosity, and it was like he had not missed a beat from the time he really was the king of late night.
I think it's sad that he retired so early, left TV so early. But the quality of talk, if you ever see the Jack Paar show tapes, it was much higher than it is today. It wasn't necessarily actors or actresses or rock and roll people just coming on to plug their latest work. It was talk.
Live with Regis and Kathy Lee and the Rosie O'Donnell Show are celebrity-driven and relatively tame. They're more reminiscent of great New York shows hosted by Arthur Godfrey, Gary Moore, and Merv Griffin, which mixed talk and variety elements.
It was under many different titles, but for most of the time it was called The Morning Show. And Kathy did it with Regis a little over 3 years before we went national. And we're now in our 11th year as a national show.
Other New York talk shows can be anything but docile. Shows such as Sally Jesse Raphael, Montel Williams, Ricky Lake, Maury, and others have brought new meaning to the term true confession.
Jocelyn has been dating a man who she says is her total opposite.
I think New Yorkers feel that all these talk shows that are done here are their local shows. And I think they should think that.
Television today seems at ease with the artistry of its technology. But it wasn't always so. It took a genius named Ernie Kovacs to pave the way.
It's only a small... I just want Dumont to know ahead of time that if you think I'm going to pay you for the time that you're kidding while I'm fixing up your equipment...
The main thing about Ernie, and I think all of his friends would agree, was his genius, his inventiveness.
A gag would appear in the back of his mind, and he'd begin to work towards it. Maybe take him 15 minutes to get to it, but he'd be amusing all the way.
He had a hat, a cigar, a mustache, and a foreign name. He was absolutely irresistible. I didn't know what that was, but I wanted one of those. I liked that a lot. And very funny, very soft-spoken. He looked like a B movie, but... always losing our job. We were there, and they said Pat Weaver said he'd never take Kovacs off. And then they put this chimp on with Dave Garroway in New York, and it worked pretty well. And then we were aced out. And the next day, we were on CBS in New York on a daily show.
You know, you have to be serious doing the news and sports. At the opposite end of the studio was the set for Ernie Kovacs and Edie Adams. And once you got to know Ernie, he was just a delightful guy. And occasionally, though, he'd put a match to one of my scripts while I was on the air. He did little tricks like that. But he didn't do it often enough to be that distracting. But I just saw that sheer comedy and the foil that Edie was, his wife. That was probably more fun than any time in a studio in New York that I ever had.
One comedy bit he did where everything was actually, the table was tilted, but the camera was tilted too. So the table looked flat. Everything was pouring out of every cup and so forth because they were all...
You could find us any day. You know, you just had to look a little bit, but we were on every day. We ran out of networks.
Chevy Chase, when we were first working in this office, would talk a lot about Kovacs, because Kovacs was a really big influence of his. And we'd occasionally get a hold of a tape and we'd look at it.
And there was even a story that you and your staff went over to the Museum of Broadcasting.
Right.
And watched all the old Kovacs shows just to get a feeling for what it was that he was about.
No, we went over there because I think they had a free buffet one day.
When television production in New York was at its low point, Saturday Night Live premiered from NBC's Studio 8H in 1975. Today, no matter where they're produced, there isn't a variety show made that doesn't carry some sort of New York genetic code.
From New York, it's Saturday night.
Sometimes it's pretty raw, and sometimes there are mistakes. But the fact that it was a throwback to the earliest form of television, in that it played to what New York's strength was, which was the theater. It's performed in front of people on a stage.
Oh, we're the men of Mexico. We work from Maine to Mexico. There's nothing like this Mexico of ours.
Tonight show is powerful. I don't want to do it for you. It's a bore, but it sold a lot of copies. I mean, I bought 3 of them. My uncle bought 4.
The thing I guess everybody remembers most vividly is watching Milton Berle. I mean, Milton Berle was television in the early days.
Thanks a million.
They asked me if I had an idea for a television show, and I said, well, the only idea I have is from what I did in vaudeville, right? Which was a review, and I directed the orchestra.
Milton is a whole other chapter, for God's sake. Milton brought vaudeville to television and made it work.
I couldn't get, and I knew practically all the people in Beverly Hills and Hollywood, I couldn't get movie stars to appear with me because they would be breaking their contract with MGM or anything, and they weren't allowed. So we got vaudeville acts, jugglers, singers, dancers, musicians.
Sometimes I'd drop by when I had nothing to do in the early evening and just go in the back of and sit down and watch him work. It was fascinating, because he cracked a whip like you don't believe.
I was a pain in the A. Okay, they called me, they said, well, he's rough to work with because he's a perfectionist. And that's the worst thing to be called, is a perfectionist, because if it doesn't work out, they blame you.
Greg Garrison, who was the director, said, we're 10 minutes long, Milton, and now we're going on in 8 minutes. He knew every second of that show. So he would say, while he's putting his makeup on, he'd say, Alvin, tell Phil Regan, the singing cop, instead of doing 2 songs, he'll do 1, and then in the sketch, when I say ba-ba-boom, that's the end of the sketch. And he says, that'll be about 10 minutes, and then I can roll it up at the end of the show.
A dancer, a singer, a comedian, a juggler, a magician, acrobatic acts. That was what the word implies, variety. And Ed Sullivan was the last actual variety show.
As you well know, Ed Sullivan, as Fred Allen said, Ed Sullivan will be a hit as long as there are talented people around.
On Sunday afternoon, you would do a dress rehearsal, and everybody would be like this, because if Ed didn't like what you were doing, you were fired.
Just like that?
Just like that. They'd come and say to you, well, thank you, but you won't be on this evening.
I now walk over to Mr. Sullivan during the applause and get to find out whatever that thing is he always whispers to comics while he holds their hands so long their applause ends awkwardly. And I thought, I'm going to get to hear it. And I walked over and he said, nice to have you back, youngster. I had never been on the show before.
He called me some pretty odd names. I was on it maybe half a dozen times. And, I mean, he would call me by the wrong name.
He introduced me to his wife 28 times.
This is the way Ed Sullivan would edit comedy material. That's okay. That's okay. No, that's out. That's out.
May I present you with this little gift? Well, thank you, son. Say no more, my dear.
Hello, Mabel. It worked. The party's on. We got the whole joint to ourselves.
He was a very interesting guy. He would come on stage in a big white bathrobe, sit in an easy chair facing upstage center and watch the June Taylor dancers dance for him.
Sid Caesar was huge, bigger than Ed Sullivan, bigger than Milton Berle, but the star burned bright, but relatively briefly in terms of the history of TV.
He was a product of a polyglot city. If he did not live in a polyglot city, he never would have learned the 600 different languages that he speaks, each of them his own invention.
Наши старины, вот вечно крайчика люди признаете, здрасте, да-да-да, как ты говорят, сердце, Маруська, полужный говорите, да-да, до свидания, понимай, хорошо, ты мне я, у правда, у Совета, у Сталина, ура, ура, ура!
Listen, Joe.
We were a show. You know, before that they had bowling and they had wrestling and they had, that was about it. They had a couple of shows about this and that. But this was the first. Milton showed that, you know, you could do a variety show every week. This was a review with sketches, with, you know, with everything, with production numbers. It was a real, you know, like the first act of a Broadway show.
Imogene Coca said that she used to love to look out at the audience before the show each week because it gave her the feeling of appearing on Broadway.
I think everything came from Caesar. I really mean it.
Under the guidance of Max Liebman, who was the producer of your show of shows, they just set a standard for sketches, for monologues, for pantomimes that I think, you know, were the templates for what's still done.
The format of the show was his, and then we had to fill in the format. You know, there's a sketch here, there's a sketch here, and what's the sketch? You got to write it. You got to get it, you got to write it, you got to put it down, you got to rehearse it, and you got to put it up on its feet. There's a lot of difference between the page and the stage.
Sid Caesar's writers form a who's who of the deans of comedy. Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, Larry Gelbart, Mel Brooks, and Woody Allen, among others. They've defined American comedy for the past 40 years.
So we had a good combination of different talents, and they all melded, and there was a lot of fights in the room. You know, nothing good comes easy, and that's true. If you want to do something, you gotta really work at it. You know, once in a while you get lucky and you get something, you know.
I went up there to be interviewed, and of course, this was the highest compliment that one could be paid.
Milt Kamen, the fellow I spoke of earlier, Sid's stand-in, poked his head in the door and he said, "You want some help?" He said, I have the young Larry Gelbart here. And I said, "The young Larry Gelbart is here." And he brought Woody in. And Woody looked about 6.
It was very, very quiet. Very, very quiet. But very, very good.
We chatted for about 20 minutes or so, and, you know, I was very shy, very timid. And Sid said, "We'll meet tomorrow," and then just turned to me and said, "And you're hired."
He wasn't vocal at all. He was to tell everything to Larry Gelbart.
Sid encouraged us to be as creative as we could be, and we were, and also we knew that we were creating material for an incredible soloist, a performer that could do anything we came up with.
I love television. When people make fun of television, I don't understand. I think it's terrific. There's everything there for you, whatever you want.
Television today, some good stuff, some bad stuff, a lot of crap.
Dreck, dirt, failures. The thing that frightens me is your failure now just doesn't affect 100 or 1,500 people in the theater. The crap affects millions every night, conditioning them as to what taste is.
By 1961, most primetime television production had moved to Hollywood. Curiously, this was the same time FCC Chairman Newton Minow said television had become a vast wasteland. Those words still resonate and are debated.
All right, an update. Is it still a vast wasteland?
I think you could call it half vast.
The first night I went on television in 1971 on a regular basis on a local news show, at that point in my life, I had written 15 books. And the first words I said on television were heard by more people than had read all 15 of my books put together by a wide margin. And that was sort of a scary thing because I had put a lot more work into 15 books than I had put into 4 minutes of sports.
Nobody's really analyzed what television has done to us. I think basically it's been a very destructive experience.
It's so seductive. The medium is so seductive. It's so easy just to lie back and let it massage you, you know.
The audience demands more and more from their viewing. They want shows that satisfy them and entertain them, and they keep pushing us to do things better, faster, different.
I don't think the audience wants cutting-edge television. They want to just be taken care of, actually. And I think that they watch characters that make them laugh, that they believe would help them if they ever met them.
My whole motto has been trying to make people laugh.
I know it sounds very simplistic, but I think people at the end of the day put television on because they want to escape and they really want to just take it easy and enjoy themselves.
But the more you can reach out and have somebody feel what you're really doing, that's what people turn on the television for.
Some among us claim to never watch television. I don't know about you, but I don't trust anybody who says that. The medium has enraptured even the finest minds of this century, as Sid Caesar discovered in 1955.
I remember I was rehearsing. It was a particularly tough show this week because we were doing a long sketch. And we were in the middle of rehearsing, and all of a sudden my secretary comes in. And she said, "Mr. Caesar, Albert Einstein wants to talk to you." So I looked at the writers and went, "Now you start to play around. What's the matter with you? We're in trouble here." "All right, thank you." No. Albert Einstein's on the phone.
Helen Dukas, Einstein's private secretary, was on the phone for Sid, and he took the call. She made a date for Einstein and Sid to meet. But sadly, the great scientist died before the appointment. Caesar thought he'd never know what Einstein wanted to discuss until...
About a year later, I remember I was giving a lecture at Columbia University. And a man walks up to me, he's a little man. He says, "Pardon me, you're Sid Caesar, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "I'm Robert Oppenheimer." "Who?" "Robert Oppenheimer." "Robert Oppenheimer?" Holy Jesus. He said, "Yeah, you know, Albert used to talk about you. He loved you. He loved the professor. He wanted to talk to you about the human equation."
I don't know what the human equation means, but I do believe that there are people, artists, who are true poets. A true poet is in touch with everything human.
The author Thomas Wolfe, an adopted New Yorker, said, "One belongs to New York instantly. One belongs to it as easily in 5 minutes as in 5 years." He could just as easily have been speaking of television. We can only speculate as to television's future, but no medium has brought the world so vividly to our homes, offered so many shared experiences, and helped us to better understand our human equation.
Television technology has improved. Its delivery systems have expanded. But has television ever really lost its New York roots?
We have our own cast here. The Studlight ladies, here they are. Gorgeous Gelman. Magnificent
I hope the show hasn't been a drag. Oh, one more thing. Good night. I love you.
Special funding is provided by The Wiz.
The Keyspan Energy family of companies has been dedicated to the communities they serve for more than a century. Keyspan Energy is proud to be a part of celebrating NYTV by the people who made it. We hope you have enjoyed the program.
And there you have the second of our two-part special documentary highlighting the earliest history of television in this country, live from New York TV, and the people who made it. I want to thank Don Lee, our producer, for acquiring those two special documentaries for us. I hope you enjoyed them. I'd like to know what you thought of those and give us suggestions for any other programs that you'd like to let us know about by sending a card or letter to I Remember Television, KVCR TV, 701 South Mount Vernon Avenue, San Bernardino, California, 92410. Or you may wish to use our website to send us email at www.kvcr.org. And as always, we especially want to hear from you. This is Ed Rothhaar. Thank you for joining me as I Remember Television.
I Remember Television, a perspective on the past, is written by Ed Rothhaar, produced by Don Leifer, directed by Al Gondos, and comes to you from KVCR TV in San Bernardino. I Remember Television is a production of the San Bernardino Community College District.